right here on the show. Just to give you a brief preamble into this conversation, between January and June this year, Track FM, the Women's International Peace Center, and the International Center for Transitional Justice partnered and carried out a radio campaign in northern Uganda in the areas of Gulu, Kotido, Arua, Lira, Pakwach, and the rest to find out the citizens' perspectives on transitional justice in northern Uganda. The radio talk shows were many. Around 80 radio talk shows were held to ascertain whether or not the people were actually conversant of the transitional justice in northern Uganda. Do they know that there is a policy that was passed in June of 2019, the national transitional transitional justice policy that was passed in June of 2019. All that will be discussed right here on the show, and I'm not alone. We also found that during that campaign that 55% of the respondents in that area actually they were saying government has done little to recognize the suffering and the persisting impact of the conflict on the women in that area and the children born of conflict in northern Uganda. Now, to discuss this and a lot more, I'm now joined by Miss Juliet Were. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. She's not alone. I also do have Honorable Leandro Komakech. He's the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. I also do have Miss Margaret Ajok. She is the National Advisor on Transitional Justice at the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. We also have some virtual panelists. If you can give me that feed. Yes, there they are. We do have Sarah Kihika Kasande. She is the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. And we also do have Jeanette Arach. She actually is the co-director and co-founder of Watiechi Gen. It is a non-government organization that works to actually help women survivors of that conflict and the children born in that captivity. Now, we do have Miss Juliet, I do have Honorable Leandro Komakech, have Miss Ajok, and the online panelists. And Ms. Echwaru, please give me the online panelists. I want to start with Sarah Kihika Kasande. She's the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. She has a lot of information as far as transitional justice is concerned. Sarah, if you can hear me, a very good afternoon. How are you doing today? We would like to know more about transitional justice and the current context. How does it apply to Uganda? Go ahead, Sarah. As we try to establish that connection with Sarah Kasande, she is the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. She's a lawyer and she knows a lot more about transitional justice. Sarah, if you've established that feed right about now, what is transitional justice and how does it apply for Uganda?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
Transitional justice is a field that emerged in the 1970s, particularly in Latin America. In very simple terms, it refers to how societies that are grappling with legacies of human rights violations or periods of repressive rule confronts those violations. In other words, the processes or measures that societies put in place in order to address those human rights violations and charter a path towards peace, justice, democratic governance, and respect for the rule of law. Now, in the Ugandan context, as you know, from the time we gained independence in 1962, this country has had cycles of conflict, largely characterized by serious violations of human rights, and most of these have gone unaddressed. Now, in the context of our discussion today, you are aware that we had a 20-year armed conflict in northern Uganda between the Lord's Resistance Army and the government of Uganda, which witnessed a series of human rights violations. Thousands of people were killed, were abducted. We have a number of victims of sexual and gender-based violence. And as you know, we also have young people who are recruited as child soldiers. Now, the transitional justice process in Uganda seeks to reckon with those violations provide truth, acknowledgement, and justice to victims of these violations, while ensuring that these atrocities do not occur again. But beyond Northern Uganda, as we know that many of our citizens and so members of society have relatives who are still missing. This week we'll be marking, on the 30th of August, we'll be marking the day of the disappeared. And many families want to know what happened to their beloved relatives who were either abducted or who were either killed. So in simple terms, transitional justice seeks to respond to those issues, assist a society move from a period of instability, a period of repression, into a society where the rights of human beings are respected, but importantly, the rule of law and democratic principles are adhered to.
Yes, Sarah, also, why does it matter? Why does transitional justice matter in Uganda? Why is it so important for the people of Uganda?
It is important for a number of reasons. First, from the perspective of victims of these human rights violations, they have a constitutional right to an effective remedy. So the state has an obligation to provide them with justice, but also to provide them with the truth. Secondly, it is important because as a country, we want to avoid these cycles of conflict and human rights violations. We want to have a future where we're guaranteed sustainable peace and all individuals live in dignity and with respect for their rights. Now, transitional justice is an approach that helps break ties with that turbulent past. And that's why it's critical for this country. And as I've already highlighted in my previous submission, that addressing these violations, creating accountable institutions is key to ensuring that we do not go back to those dark times of violent conflict.
Sarah Kihika Kasande is the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. Let me also bring in Margaret Ajok. She is the National Advisor on Transitional Justice at the Justice, Law and Order Sector Secretariat at the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Ms. Margaret Ajok, a very good afternoon once again. Many thanks for having made the time to speak to NTV Uganda. We would like to know what is the how did the National Transitional Justice Policy come into place? We'd like to know, first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Romeo, and the viewers. I'm happy that Sarah will highlighted the issues. Transitional justice in Uganda came to the limelight after the Juba peace process. That's the peace process between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army. It was a protected...
When was this? 2006?
From 2006 to 2008.
All
so
right.
That's when I would say that the issues on transitional justice were highlighted. As much as the final peace agreement wasn't signed in 2008 by the delegation of the Lord's Resistance Army, there were a couple of agreements that were signed by both the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army. And among the key agreements that was signed that today brings us to this discussion was the agreement on accountability and reconciliation and its attendant annexures that made recommendations to government of Uganda on how the atrocities that had been committed in the north would be addressed. So basically the transitional justice policy is a replica of the peace talks. The only difference is that whereas the transitional justice process then was in Northern Uganda, we decided that as a country we cannot only look at the issues that happened only in the north. And that's why we had to undertake national consultations on all the 8 sub-regions in this country, looking at different conflicts that had taken place. And as you're aware, also there are issues that happened in the Rwenzori sub-region, the active conflict. Exactly. And so we studied all those conflicts, and we found that as much as these were recommendations made during the Juba peace process for Northern Uganda, they were applicable to the rest of Uganda. So basically that's how the process started, and the implementation of, and actually in 2008 there was a presentation by the then Minister of Internal Affairs to Cabinet, who actually presented the progress of the peace talks, and then the then Prime Minister recommended that those recommendations be adopted and the different MDAs take immediate action in implementing the provisions of the Juba peace agreement and its annexures. So that's how the Ministry of Justice through the Justice, Law and Order sector comes in to implement provisions on the Agreement on Accountability and Reconciliation. And then we got into a protracted national consultations and recommendations, and finally the product, which is the policy now.
Well, of course, you mentioned that the draft came about during the peace talks, the Juba peace talks between 2006 and 2008.
Yes.
But why did it take so long? Because Cabinet passed the National Transitional Justice Policy only on the 18th of June 2019. That is more than 10 years after the very, very first draft. Why did it take so long, Ms. Margaret?
Maybe let me state it rightly. We did not have a first draft of the policy within that time frame. We only had recommendations for the development of a legal framework. So 2008 was basically when finally government proclaims itself on implementing some of the provisions, rather on implementing the provisions in the Juba peace process. And national consultations started in 2011, stretched up to 2012, because we were doing thorough consultations. We didn't want to leave any gaps. So we had the first draft, which is basically a working draft, in 2012, which went out for consultations, civil society, development partners, and many other. So following that draft was subsequent drafts that were based on the different consultations that we were undertaking from all the other stakeholders that we had. So as you might be aware, policy or legal drafting is not a one go.
Yes.
There are many other technical issues that go in place that are not privy to the public. Things like cost, like regulatory impact assessments and many other things. So many times the public sees that it's a process that is protracted because they are not privy to knowing what goes into the technicalities. So yeah, so basically that's how much I would explain the delays.
But I'll be honest with you, Ms. Margaret Ajok, we had given up on the transition, national transitional justice policy, but then it was quite a huge surprise in 2019, and many of us, instead of complaining, we were so happy that at least government had acknowledged that they had a part to play in this process of reconciliation in Northern Uganda, not only Northern Uganda, but Zori region, Luwero Triangle, and so forth. So we would like to know, let's focus on the National Transitional Justice Policy. What are its goals and what are the key priorities it addresses?
Okay. Basically, the Transitional Justice Policy, if you will allow me to, just take it out of the policy so that I don't miss any words.
Indeed.
The policy vision is a peaceful, just and stable Uganda. That's the policy vision. And the policy mission is to promote national reconciliation, peace and justice. And our goal is basically to provide a legal framework, which is the policy here, for the management and operations of both formal and non-formal justice processes for post-conflict situations. So basically those are the tenets of the policy. And maybe one of the issues that Sarah did not highlight about transitional justice is that it's hinged on two mechanisms, the formal and non-formal justice process. The
traditional justice mechanism.
That's part of the non-formal, So basically people know about the court system, which is the formal criminal prosecutions for alleged perpetrators, but there are also non-formal mechanisms that do not necessarily take a formal context. That's like the traditional justice mechanisms, the reparations programs. There are some that are awarded after courts, but there are those that can be done, without even a formal court system. And then we also have the nation building and reconciliation processes, and then we also have the amnesty processes. So it's a mix. It's basically one holistic term that puts together all these justice mechanisms to come to promote justice, to promote healing, to promote reconciliation, and ensure accountability.
All right, Ms. Margaret Ajok, she's the National Advisor on the Justice, Law and Order Sector, Secretariat to the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. I also do have Honorable Leandro Komakech, is a Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. Mr. Leandro Komakech, help us understand, what is the role of Parliament in moving the transitional justice agenda forward?
Well, I first need to thank my panelists for raising up these issues, and I think I also thank NTV for keeping these issues afloat. It has not been easy on these issues, and I must thank Margaret. we started all this a long way ago. I remember I was a master's student when the Juba Peace talks was ongoing. And I would sit in there and listen to how it was very difficult to move forward. Until that day, when the third agenda item 3 came into the discussion, the whole night, it ended at 4 a.m. is when it was adopted. I think that was the beginning of a window that gave hope to Ugandans on the issues of transitional justice. We also must thank the Prime Minister, who was by then the chief government, head of government delegation, and his permanent secretary, then Kagoda, who stood firm on this agenda item. Among all the items, if you look at cessation of hostilities and then comprehensive solutions, and then this, I think this has been one of the most important items that government accepted to take on board in absence of the final peace agreement. Because I remember on the day that Joseph Kony was to walk from wherever he was, we waited the whole day in Jubaraha Hotel until there was no show. But then the government said, well, we shall commit to follow up on the agenda items that were signed. So
it seems like he was buying time to regroup.
Well, I would not want us to discuss.
According to the literature I was reading.
A lot of, we need to write a whole book about this thing. So the conflict in Northern Uganda, I would not like to call it the LRA conflict.
Yes.
Because this was, LRA was an outcome of a bigger question that was not resolved.
Yes,
but the geography of the war took place in the north. I think as members of parliament, these were one of those serious issues that drove us into going to parliament. Because if you look at how the communities in Northern Uganda, amidst war, government tried to intervene on issues of support for programs and everything. If you remember, NAP 1, NAP 2, and all this, were amidst conflict. But there was need for a framework that would allow a process that is smooth. And we should also thank the former cabinet secretary, Opio Lokone, was one of those key actors that helped this process to go. For us, when we arrived in Parliament, the first thing we did was, how do we position ourselves as members of the Greater North Parliamentary Forum? And I think we tried that. Our first was to bring together all members of Parliament to this issue. At that time, I remember Margaret was there. She had to update also Parliament. That time, we were new, but it helped a lot to address, some of the gaps that many members did not know about transitional justice. That was the time when Parliament accepted, through the Speaker, to also give a little pressure to Cabinet, to say, well, we need this thing. If you are dealing with the policy, we start on reverse with the bill for this. So that helped us to catalyze the processes. And of course, Margaret was steadfast on making sure that even if they have always been sent away from Cabinet, they went back and forth. And until when it came out, I'm happy for the first time that among the cardinal pillars of the policy, traditional justice was integrated. And you remember that our common law is not our thing. It is a foreign thing. From Modern Council and all these came here, we adopted them. But for the first time, Uganda will go in the history of Africa as one of those countries that are going to start implementing a new jurisprudence. And this should also flow to law schools. That when you go to schools of law, you should now undergo trainings on all this. So that we have lawyers that are very, very integrated, which is very good. We were happy yesterday when we were vetting the Chief Justice and the Deputy, they raised this issue. And the Chief Justice's thesis of this master's in Bradford is on traditional justice. And he said this is going to be part of what will help them in the non-formal system. So for me, what is left is that we need to appropriate enough money to implement the transitional justice policy. We now need to shift away from the issue of cattle compensation to the issue of reparation as a broader concept of giving back to society what they lost. Those that lost opportunities in schools, how do we address them? You know, there are children there who lost school, not because of their interest, but they did not go to school.
So how do we revive their aspirations?
Yeah, that is why reparation as an agenda that Margaret, my sister, highlighted, now goes into fit that. If you look at in Uganda, I think we have not accepted the wrongdoings of other past regimes. And this policy now will help us that if we begin to roll out the implementation, we would like President Museveni to apologize on behalf of all former leaders. What took place in this country? That is what the policy is about. National reconciliation. You know, from independence to date, those who up to date, the Saban Kotos in the east, you know, Bench Wanokas, you know, in central, many others. So from that process, a remembrance day, and I think the policy talks about it. The remembrance day would be the most important day in this country that will begin to unite Ugandans. That this day is for us to reflect the past and look forward to the future.
Indeed.
And that is what the policy puts very clearly to address. For me, it is now about moving, as we implement the policy, about the law. And that is why we have always been, you know, a little pressure been giving to Margaret and the ministry. We need the bill. We need the draft.
The National Transitional Justice
Bill.
Yes.
So
what is the current progress, Honorable Leandra?
I've been told it is on a zero draft. You may tell me further than zero draft where it has reached, because we almost said we are going to move a private member's bill. But then the speaker said, no, there's progress going on. And of course, we always relate a lot on what goes on. So we are patiently waiting for the Transitional Justice draft bill. But before that, as members of Parliament, we would like the Ministry of Justice to come to Parliament to address members of Parliament on what the Transitional Justice policy is. So that when it comes to appropriation, they would know what they are doing. Because many times when you talk about transitional justice, to someone who may not have been on these issues of peace and conflict, may be a new story. So we need to tell members that we are having in place a policy that tries to address the legacies of the past violence and look at how the future should go. And I know everybody is on board on this. So we look forward to the Minister of Justice, through Margaret, to come and address us. I know with the COVID-19 compliance, we may have some few members in the conference hall. We normally sit there, and then we get this on board, so that the next appropriation of budget should not be blind. We should know that the budget committee are addressing issues that are understood by all, so that at the end we do not have any situation where this budget is thrown out. I think this is the last time we should deal with the issues of cattle compensation. We need more than that, because for this budget, we gave 20 billion for, I think 20 billion for cattle compensation in the north, 10 for Acholi, and then 10, I think 10 is going to eastern Uganda or Lango sub-region. But I think concretely, the government of Uganda should ensure that we also put in place an entire commission to drive this process, to implement this policy. And for me, I look at Amnesty Commission should be transformed to become a Transitional Justice Commission, so that we have commissioners which relate to the pillars that Margaret talked about. Commissioner in charge of reparation, commissioner in charge of traditional justice, commissioner in charge of this. Now, once that is set, and then it is going to be easy. Amnesty will be part of those pillars. So I think we need to move faster.
Honorable Leandra Komakech is the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. I also do have Miss Juliet Were. She's the Deputy Executive Director for the Women's International Peace Center. Now, like I mentioned during my preamble into this conversation, that Track FM, Women's International Peace Center, and the International Center for Transitional Justice carried out a community dialogue campaign on 80 radio stations, and the discussion was about the community perspectives on transitional justice in Northern Uganda. Now get this, over 40,400 and how many were they? 74,000? There were so many respondents that actually answered to these poll questions, and then you had 74,441, and then you had 93,000 people responding to those poll questions. Now, Ms. Juliet Were, why was it necessary to actually run radio and community debates and also run polls on transitional justice?
Thank you very much. For us as actors in peace and conflict over the years, when the policy was passed, we were excited. It gave us an opportunity to continue with the work that we have been doing. And one of the key issues raised in the policy, it calls upon other actors to contribute in popularizing the policy. So we and our partners agreed to design the radio campaign. Radio, because it reaches a massive audience in Northern Uganda, but also it gives a two-way participation in terms of voicing and raising issues that happened. I would like to thank the tens of thousands of women and men who participated in this campaign. I would like to thank our partners, ICTJ, Track FM, Refugee Law Project, INET, FIDA Uganda, who provided the technical base of designing the campaign. The campaign was designed over a period of 6 months using radio and especially using messaging and poll questions, which were designed and aired over 2 weeks so that communities are able to respond to the different issues that were designed. We categorized the questions according to the themes within the policy so that after every 2 weeks, we're discussing one issue based on the policy. For us, engaging communities, participation is a key component and attribute that we value. We had to go back to ensure that the communities are aware that the policy is in place, but also get their views and perspectives on what they think about the different themes.
But Juliet, we must allow the respondents that actually took the time to respond to those opinion poll questions. 70,441. That's not an easy number. And in total, it was 93,000 people responding to only 8 opinion poll questions. So please, thank you very much for having participated in that process. Please continue, Juliet.
So in the process, we realized that not everyone has access to radio. Not everyone has access to a phone to be able to send the SMS messages to the station. So we organized community dialogues to give opportunity to women, men and children to participate. Because in the analysis we noticed that the participation of women was like at 22% compared to the men. And it was a concern because we need to enable women participate and be part of the process.
Sarah will help us understand why that was the case. She's a gender expert. Go ahead.
So in the process, we had radio talk shows also, where we invited key personnel from the districts, leaders, religious leaders, activists, to come and discuss and also be able to analyze the issues that were coming up from the analysis. Because on a weekly basis, Track FM, through its online platform, would analyze the key issues emerging from the messaging that was coming up, the key issues that was emerging from the radio talk shows, and this would inform the next radio talk show.
So what were the key issues coming out of most of these respondents?
One of the key issues was access to justice. And on this, we looked at the 2 forms. Formal justice, where the key outstanding issue was that communities were not happy with the justice system because it is very slow, they are not able to reach to the courts, and their issues are not be able to address on time. They were also concerned that the systems do not reach down to the communities. So people have to walk distances and it takes a long time for them to have their issues resolved. They were also concerned on the costs that are involved in accessing justice. So for them, the formal justice system was not enabling them to to have their issues addressed. On the other hand, the traditional justice mechanisms were to some extent responsive to the issues of communities, because they are closer to the community. The religious leaders are within reach, the chiefs are within reach, the clan leaders are within reach. So this, in a way, gave them a form of access and consolence. But on the traditional justice system, there was also concern that the fact that the structures are more male-dominated in terms of leadership,
yes,
it, in a way, is not able to handle those gender-related issues that women position.
Not only males, but also elderly people.
Elderly people.
Even the young people are clamoring to
so
join
the issues of women and the young people, the youth, are not addressed the way they should be addressed.
And the issue of amnesty, what were they saying?
On the issue of amnesty, there was more appreciation of the amnesty process. Because when the war happened in Northern Uganda, amnesty gave an opportunity to the many youth men who were taken in abduction innocently. So it gave them an opportunity to come back home, be listened to, be compensated, and resettle in their communities. However, others were concerned that people should not just receive amnesty. They need to come and explain what happened.
And that is the majority, 87%.
Yes, what happened, so that the communities are able to either forgive or decide which mechanism to address the issues. So the issues of accountability. But also the issue of what about the women and children? Because the amnesty, as was designed, was looking at giving mattress, hose, go back. But what about those who came out of abduction and they don't have either legislation, identification? So the whole system needs to also look at how do we fast track and come up with mechanisms that support these vulnerable groups that are normally not addressed in these processes.
And on the issue of reparations, what are they saying?
On reparations, the discussion was on rebuilding the communities. And we looked at the programs that have been in place to support the economic recovery, the healing. We looked at NGO programs, government programs like PRDP, NUSAF 1, and others. And the key issue was that NGO programs were seen to have provided more recovery to the communities. Government programs, although they were in place, they were large. Some never got the opportunity to have access to the finances, to have access to schools, to have their health centers repaired, to have their roads repaired. So it was not at par as would be expected. There was also the issue of the trauma healing programs were not adequate, because years of trauma, years of not being able to work for yourself meant that there was need to have a system that helps everyone to heal, come to terms, and have programs that address the recovery of the young women, the men, the entire society and community, because everyone was affected in a way. So that was one of the issues about reparation.
And I was also reading the report, and it indicated that 55% of the respondents wanted government to apologize and take care of the children born in captivity, while only a small number, 18%, they were saying, no, 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 the fathers who committed these atrocities should apologize and take care of the children. So I'm grappling to understand, and I'm sure the viewer too, why is it that majority of the people in Northern Uganda say it's government that is supposed to apologize and take care of these children, and not the fathers who committed the atrocities?
I want to link to what Honorable said, that it is the responsibility of government to protect and provide for its citizens.
So they are saying you didn't protect us,
Yes.
so please.
You didn't protect us at that time, but even 20 years after the conflict, there hasn't been a deliberate effort to ensure that our children are in school, that they can access scholarships, they can access hospitals, they can participate as citizens. So it is a mandate and responsibility of government to ensure that this happens. So government has to apologize if total healing has to happen. Yeah.
Juliet Were is the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Would also like to know what is the experience of these women who are formerly abducted and the children who were actually born in captivity. Let's link to Janet Arach. She's online. Yes, there you are, Janet. A very good afternoon once again. I hope you are doing well. And would like to know what is the situation of the women. Yes, the women survivors of sexual violence and the children born in captivity. What is their situation now?
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful today for hosting me for this meeting. Thank you for the organizer of the program and then my panelists in the studio. I thank you all and the listeners of this radio. My name is Janet Arach. I work for Watikigen. Watikigen is a community-based organization working for children born in captivity. I personally, I was also abducted. I came back. I took so many years in the bush. I came back. And right now, the situation of these children, how we started Watikigen, it was basically on the issues which was coming across from the children born in captivity. When the mothers were returning from captivity, they were not looked, people were not looking at the children they came back with. So when the children were growing up, there was a lot of issues which they were facing in the community. For example, stigma was on them, rejection, discrimination, which they were facing, both from the communities or even in the school where they're studying from. So right now, the children are growing up, majority are now coming to 17, 18 years. Because of the stigma which is going on, they started asking their parents, their mothers, why are people stigmatizing them? Where were they born? Are they not any other children like the other children who are born from home here? So the issue was really burning the children so much, and we sat down, we have started saying, okay, what can we do so that the country or the nation can be aware of these children, the situation they're undergoing on. So after that, then we opened Watikigen to raise up the voice of these children born in captivity, because they have the challenges of identity. Identity, because most of them did not come with their parents, especially the paternal, their fathers from captivity. Most of the fathers dies from captivity, and the mother came with them, and now the children want to find out where their fathers come from. And indeed, that is the most activity which we are doing right now, because we want to trace and find out the paternal home of children who really fully rejected in the community, and they don't have anywhere to go. And we are tracing their the paternal homes, and we take them there. But the challenge is, you know, this war has affected many people in the community. And majority of people are now poor in the community. And you find that there is always fear from the paternal homes of accepting these children because of the condition they are in right now. And you find that they cannot even support this child to be in their home. With this issue of land, which is now coming up, you know, no one is accepting to give land to these children. And these children, they are questioning themselves, where is our future? Because right now, many are not studying, they are at home. The few who are studying, they are not knowing where they are going to, how they are going to end their lives.
Very important.
So, the situation is becoming worse and worse. Another situation which is right on the ground is the issue of the the birth certificate, which is on the ground. Because if you see, when you go to register to get a birth certificate, they ask you some details of your parents, where were you born, which country, what is the name of your father. And majority of these children, they don't know their father's name. And even if their mother tell them about their fathers, but the most detailed part of it, they don't know. And you find that when you are registering, and if somebody is taking your data especially from NIRA, if you are giving your data to them, and you said, me, I was born from Sudan, and from Sudan there, automatically the person who is registering you will automatically say, no.
You're from Sudan.
If you are born from Sudan, you have to go and get the birth certificate from Sudan. Now, how can we help these children now? Since they're born in Sudan, they're born in the bush, they don't know where how to start getting the the birth certificate. How can we support these children to get birth certificate? Because the only thing which can now make them to get birth certificates, some of them you have to lie, of which now it's not right. If you try to tell the truth of your background, it will not be accepted. So how best can we help now these children who are growing up, and it is our children of Uganda?
Yes,
how
Janet.
Can we support?
Yes, Janet Arach, we are also getting information that because of lack of documentation, many of these young people cannot participate in many government development programs that were put in place to alleviate the suffering of the survivors of the war. What do you have to say about this?
You know, government program, it's always there, but if you see on the ground, you cannot really access. You cannot access it because of your background. You cannot access government programs. So many government programs always come, but you find the community always, if you go and join them like you want to also to be part of them, they will tell you that you people, NGOs has already supported you so much. Why are you still coming here to get support? So it makes someone to feel really demoralized.
Yes. Yes, Janet, we are also getting information that even the little land that was given to some widows is being taken away from them by the communities. Is this true, that community members are attacking the widows of the war and taking the land that was given to them under the customary land system? Is it true?
Yes, it's very true. We have some issues which we always receive from the mothers. Majority of the mothers, they are rejected from their community, especially even from their families. And you find them, they cannot, the family cannot give land to these mothers so that they can also feed with their children. And you find that's why, before I told you that that is why the children started now raising the concern of getting their paternal homes, because of those issues, because land is not provided to them. And if they give you land, and they will tell you that you dig it on this land only for 1 year or 2 years, then you leave that land, of which is not right. If something is given to someone, let it now be for that person to take care of the children she has come back with. So that issue is really coming up so much. That is why we started a program with the support from World Vision. They gave us some funding so that those issues can be addressed, whereby we bought land for 30 households for the children who are totally rejected from the community. We bought 1 acre of land for them. We built a low-cost structure on them. And that is where they have started their life from, of which many are facing the same problem, whereby we cannot finish to address all that issues apart if we join hands together with the government to address these issues.
Janet Arach is the co-founder and co-director of Watechi Gen. It's a non-profit organization that works to support women, especially those who are formerly abducted and the children born in captivity. And according to a poll that was carried out by Track FM, Women's International Peace Center and the International Center for Transitional Justice, 55% of the respondents in Northern Uganda felt like government has not sufficiently done enough to recognize the plight of and the suffering of the people who were affected by this war and the children who were born in captivity. Well, like I mentioned before, I do have Juliet Were. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Honorable Leandro Komakech made some time for us. He's the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. And you also have the is Miss Margaret Ajok. She's the National Advisor on the National Transitional Justice and in the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. We also do have Janet Arach, like I mentioned, and finally Sarah Kihika Kasande, the head of office at the International Center for International Center for Transitional Justice in Uganda. Let's take a very brief break. We're going to return with more information right here on the show. Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on NTV Uganda. My name is Romy Busika and of course today we are discussing the citizens' perspectives on transitional justice in Northern Uganda. Like I mentioned before in my preamble into this conversation, Track FM, Women's International Peace Center and the International Center for Transitional Justice carried out a campaign where they held talk shows, 80 of them, radio talk shows, where they wanted to get some of the perspectives of the people in Northern Uganda on how the conflict, all the effects of the conflict have been handled by the central government. I do have Juliet Were. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. I also have, in the middle right there, Honorable Leandro Komakech. He's the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. And on the far left, we do have Miss Margaret Ajok. She's the National Advisor to the Justice, Law and Order Sector Secretariat of the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Our online panelists, I haven't forgotten about you. I see you, Janet Arach. She's the co-founder and the co-director of Watechi Gen. It's an NGO that works to support formerly abducted women and their children born in captivity. And lastly, there she is, Sarah Kihika Kasande. She's the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. Let me get to you, Sarah, and let's discuss the key issues or gaps that need to be addressed as far as transitional justice is concerned in Uganda. What are some of those key issues or gaps that need to be addressed?
Thank you very much. I'll just highlight a few of the key issues. But first and foremost, and the most prominent, is to deliver justice to victims of these past atrocities. As I highlighted before, we have thousands of victims who continue to grapple with the legacies of the harms that they endured during the period of conflict.
Yes.
Some of them have physical wounds, others have got survivors of sexual violence. We have individuals who lost property. Now, all these are issues that need to be addressed through a process. And I'm very glad that my co-panelists mentioned the process of reparations. Now, I'd like to distinguish one thing, the distinction between reparations and the development programs that government has been implementing in Northern Uganda. As we know, development really draws from the social contract. The state has an obligation to put in place various economic policies and processes to assist the broader society achieve its development goals, whereas reparations arise as a result of the harms and violations that a person has suffered. In other words, rights, the enforcement of rights of an individual whose rights have been violated. Victims, we're looking at issues of restitution for victims who lost property, and we're also looking for what we just mentioned, apology. Apology is rooted in acknowledgement, the acknowledgement that this is a citizen with rights.
Please don't go away, Sarah. I believe we have lost Sarah Kihika Kasande, the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. When that issue is rectified, we shall get back to you, Sarah. But let me also indulge Miss Margaret Ajok, the National Advisor on National Transitional Justice in Uganda at the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Ms. Margaret Ajok, let's discuss another issue. What can the citizens of Uganda expect from this policy now that it's in place?
Okay. Yeah, for the citizens that are watching, obviously once a policy is passed, there is a task for implementation of that policy. Yes. And I would like to draw back from the discussion by Janet Arach about the children born of war as part of the package for reparations. And reparations is one of the processes that needs to be implemented within this policy. And I also like to build confidence to the survivors out there who are watching that the policy acknowledges the plight of the children born of war. And already we had actually undertaken some initiatives. Yes. In terms of what Janet just talked about in terms of birth registration and identification of these children. In 2018, just out of some of the forums that we had like this, the issue of education was raised by the mothers who are saying that some of their children could not enroll in schools because the schools were requesting for birth certificates, yes, rightly enumerated, as she has said, because of the complications. Immediately, we initiated a pilot study to examine the right to birth registration and education in Northern Uganda, and we specifically profiled Acholi sub-region. And we found from our findings, and I know that Janet was part of that group, we found that just in Acholi sub-region, there were about 6,000 of these children who are having this kind of challenges. And then we initiated a task force that involved NIRA, the Ministry of Education, and other attendant MDAs that were concerned with these issues. And we agreed that we needed at least some standard operating procedures in how to handle this issue. Because truth be told, everyone internationally must get a birth certificate where they were born. However, there is a convention on statelessness that actually puts these categories of people at the risk of statelessness. Because we all know that at the time that they were born, some of these countries where they were born was stateless, for example, Central African Republic or South Sudan, wherever they were. So it would only be inhumane for us to tell them to go back and get birth certificates in those regions. Right. So it was agreed in our small task force that with the support of NIRA, they would develop standard operating procedures and see how best they could document these children. And that is work in progress. It's work in progress, and I know NIRA is aware about this. Right. The other thing that I think is also very important that Janet highlighted was the need for those different actors that are doing good work in the community to work with government. Because I think the communities and the NGOs, they need to see government as an ally as opposed to as an obstacle. And I think this is one of the areas where we need a lot of collaborative support with whoever has data. Because as Leandro said, when these budgets are presented to cabinet, for example, Ministry of Education, if at all it's going to come up with any form of affirmative action for these categories of children, needs to know what the numbers are. Are they going to be absorbed into the normal formal education, or are they going to be absorbed into vocational or other education? So it's important that we work with the actors that are on the ground, because one of the things also that the citizens should expect with the policy is that we agreed that the policy would be implemented through the respective MDAs that have a stake in implementation of the policy. I have already highlighted Ministry of Education, so that if there is any form of affirmative action for these categories of persons in line with the education or priority education for them, it would be only obvious that Ministry of Education would have to incorporate a program within its budget and its programming that is attached to the policy. Now, when we go to issues of trauma and other medical issues that they have highlighted that the women that are suffering sexual violence have, it would be also incumbent on the Ministry of Health to incorporate some of these things. I remember I had a discussion with a trust fund, the International Criminal Court Trust Fund, who actually have been supporting this type of victims. And they were they informed us that they're actually in working relations with the Ministry of Health. Yes. So you can see that there is already some basis, there is already some background that actually the Ministry of Health can still take up additional responsibility in terms of addressing these issues. I think the gap, which was one of the biggest justifications for this policy, was the lack of appreciation of transitional justice within planning and budgeting within the different MDAs. Because like Leandro said, many do not understand possibly that these are actually interventions that can be done simultaneously with other actions that are already ongoing. To talk about the memorials, for example, building of monuments, we know that this is under the Ministry of Tourism.
Yes.
And you see, so, I remember we also had a discussion recently in the North, and we found that some of the victims actually said for them holding a national memorial day is justice enough for them. Someone doesn't need any form of monetary compensation.
Just that acknowledgement.
Exactly, just that acknowledgement. So this is call, of course, for action for us. Because, I mean, if it's justice for a whole community, that all we need is a memorial day, government acknowledges that these things happened, we are given space to pray and acknowledge these things. One, it's a deterrent. It's a deterrent in that the next generation will know that we suffered these harms and therefore we do not need to repeat it. And that's one of the tenets of transitional justice, guarantee of non-repetition. That guarantee doesn't only come from the state, but also the citizen, who many times is caught up in the whole conflict agenda. So if we can start with building a nation that acknowledges that conflict is wrong, and we do not have to resolve everything by conflict, and move on with a brighter future. I think those are some of the things. So what we should expect is that moving forward, we planning to roll out this policy to all the MDAs that have been highlighted in the policy, to support them, to see how they can plan, budget, in order to implement this policy. Because we only find that it's only sustainable if such programs run within the different MDAs, as opposed to having a one-off, because some of the effects of conflict are of a lifetime. You cannot say that you're going to have a program that is going to last 5 years and that's it. Trauma, for example, it's a lifetime. Education is a lifetime. You know, so that's one of the things that really they should, the citizens should expect about the policy. We've already started fast-tracking the law, because that was one of the directives that we had from Cabinet, to fast-track the law that is going to implement this policy. So with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is the lead ministry, it might be strange that I'm bringing in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but the policy was co-sponsored in Cabinet. There is an allowance for 2 ministries to sponsor one policy. So this policy was sponsored by Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Internal Affairs. And Ministry of Internal Affairs is going to be the lead ministry implementing the policy, with support from the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. So so yes, we've already started drafting the law, and we've already done all the technical aspects that are needed to have this law moved. We are doing the dissemination of the policy. We had planned to go all over the country. We had planned on going to all the 9 sub-regions physically to talk to the communities and give them copies of the policy and tell them what it's all about. But as is the dilemma all over the world, we have this COVID thing. But now we have planned virtual and media campaigns that we expect to be rolled out by mid-September. So we'll be going to radio stations all over the country, and we will also be on TV again with our technical team disseminating the policy. We already have soft copies on our JELOS website. So even immediately the policy was passed, we published it on our website. So those who could not access the physical copies, which we have now, could access them on soft copy. Yeah, so basically, I think for us it's more about action now.
All right.
And I think we are on course in terms of trying to have it move on with amidst the challenges.
All right. Let me also bring in Honorable Leandro Komakesh, the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. How ready is Parliament to support the implementation of the National Transitional Justice Policy?
No, we're just ready. If it means supplementary, we are ready to do that. Because already, when the budget was passed, there were issues that were raised on children and women who came out of the bush, there were many who came and petitioned us in Parliament. And I took the lead as the chair of the Greater North Parliamentary Forum to present a motion on the floor of Parliament that the women who are abducted and their children born in captivity should be supported by government. In the meantime, as we wait for the implementation of the policy, because there are issues we cannot wait. And Parliament resolved and urged the government to proceed with that process. But in the budgeting that passed, we realized that there was a shortfall on what was given to the Minister of Northern Uganda, reconstruction. So we are working with the minister together with the Prime Minister to ensure that the 20 billion that was meant to be kind of curtain raiser to some of these processes are given to these women. Because when you meet them, she has just been talking here, there are many others there. The issue of livelihood in this pandemic to these women and their children is very painful. So we need that 20 billion to, in the meantime, as we wait for the rolling out of the entire policy, to help them start with some of this simple thing. And they're not asking for much. They need 1 million, 1.5 million. They're mainly market women. There are others who are farming. They're doing so many things. There are others who need small piece of land. So I think it is time to work, and we need government to respond to this. As Parliament, we are ready to push for a supplementary support to ensure that this matter is addressed as we wait for the bigger chunk to come in the near future. I'm also happy that the Minister of Northern Uganda Reconstruction told me that there are owes for distribution to this women group and their children. Well, this is just a token, but I think it's good. We need the owes sent to the north as quickly as possible, plus other things that will be coming soon. So, as Greater North Parliamentary Forum, our platform is about ensuring that recovery process in Northern Uganda, which takes actually Bunyoro, which had the effect of the war, West Nile, Achole, Lango, Teso, Karamoja, Bugisu, up to Bukede in Tororo are handled. Of course, the epicenters are known. So that is what brings us together as Greater North Parliamentary team.
All right, Honorable Leandro, thank you very much. That is the role of Parliament. But what is the role of the religious leaders? Let me also bring in Juliet Were, the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Now, Juliet, how do religious leaders and the institutions view their role in facilitating reconciliation? And how do they view their role in contributing to the implementation of this policy?
We need to trace back to the time when the conflict was alive and during the peace talks, and look at the role that the Acholi religious leaders played.
Yes.
In terms of voicing out the issues that were happening and calling for accountability, in terms of giving a solace to the communities that something possible can happen, in terms of providing counseling and ensuring that healing continues to happen in the communities. Because religious leaders are icons that everyone looks at with hope and that they can talk and be able to challenge. So we believe that through their organized systems and mechanisms, they should be able to support in continuing to churn out information to communities, raising awareness, but also using their own development arm to ensure that they contribute to the recovery of the women and men, they contribute to the recovery of the entire community, but also use the systems to ensure that women have access to justice, utilize the traditional mechanisms, and also ensure that the gender issues are part of the priorities that they address in this process.
And of course, according to to your report, it indicated that 26% of the respondents wanted the capacity of the religious leaders to be built. Do you think that would go a long way in promoting reconciliation in Northern Uganda?
Yes, it would contribute to reconciliation, because if capacity is enhanced, then in terms of delivering justice, they'll be able to look at the needs of women, the needs of children, the needs of men. How do you lobby for these issues? So capacity is something that needs to be prioritized in the process of reconciliation.
All right. Thank you very much, Juliet. If you're watching NTV Uganda right now and you want to submit something crucial for us, a pertinent question for Juliet, Honorable Leandro, Miss Margaret, Sarah, or Janet, please call in and we'll be able to take those questions. I only need 5 callers, 5 pertinent questions for my panelists so that we can also involve the viewer who is watching right now. But then let me also bring in Janet Arach to find out how COVID-19 has affected vulnerable persons in Northern Uganda. I'm talking about the women who are formerly abducted, children born in captivity, and also the elders, the vulnerable elders. How are they navigating life during this COVID-19 pandemic? Very good afternoon again, Janet Arach. What is the situation in Northern Uganda as far as COVID-19 is concerned? How is it affecting the vulnerable persons in that area?
Yeah, thank you so much, the moderator. The situation of COVID-19, if you see these mothers, especially, I always talk about the formerly abducted and children born in captivity. Their situation is not so much well, because if you see these mothers, they are located within town area to find a way of survival. And majority, they were working like casual labor to people's home, gardens, and so forth. So during this time of COVID-19, things became worse for them because they had nowhere to go. The issue of rent, the issue of food, and all that was a challenge for them. Many were crying and begging, but you know, COVID, during the lockdown, everyone were affected. So their situation was not well, though some other people supported the few with food items, but that food items cannot last for so long. For instance, if someone is given 10 kilograms of posho and 5 kilograms of beans, will it take a week if you have many children? It will not. So automatically they will go back to that situation which they are in. I think, yes. Okay, I thank also some organizations, including us, Watiki from our fellow well-wishers who gave us some small funding, but we supported some few mothers with food items, but we found that it's not good to give food items alone. At least we have to give some seedlings for vegetables, whereby they can plant near their homes where they are renting. If the landowner accepted for them to dig, then they can plant, they can begin working on, they can feed after. If this portion is finished, they can still continue to work to survive, because it is really so worse for them, because they are not really having enough for them. Briefly, that's what I can talk about the COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much. Janet Arach. She's the co-founder and director of Wateki Gen, an NGO that works to support formerly abducted women and children born in captivity. Well, we did have a technical glitch when Sarah Kihika Kasande was making her submission. Let me get back to you, Ms. Sarah. What are the key gaps and issues that need to be addressed to make the implementation of the National Transitional Justice Policy much more easier?
Thank you very much, and apologies for the glitch.
Go ahead.
Before we broke off, I had talked about access to justice for victims, and as a key component of the transitional justice process. And one of the key elements that must be considered is consulting victims to ensure that their experiences and priorities inform the implementation of the policy. So if we're talking about reparations, the forms of reparations, the mode of delivering reparations should be informed by the needs, experiences, and harm suffered by victims. And my co-panelist, Janet Arach, who are doing amazing work in Northern Uganda, has already highlighted some of the key issues that the survivors, particularly survivors of sexual violence and children who were born in captivity, continue to experience. These violations have been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has really highlighted the urgency to provide relief, to provide reparations to victims, because in its absence, whenever we have such broad national crisis, victims become more vulnerable because they're already in a very disfavored position. Now, another aspect that is critical for our transitional justice process is reconciliation. We live in a country that is gravely polarized due to a number of factors, including structural imbalances, including unaddressed grievances. Now, for the transitional justice policy to achieve its goal, priority must be given to reconciliation, which entails an aspect of, one, reckoning with the past through a credible and independent truth-seeking process. Two, holding perpetrators accountable and reforming institutions of the state that have been culpable in human rights violations. This shall contribute critically to restoring that necessary civic trust in state institutions. As you know, right now, there's a serious breakdown of trust between citizen and state in this country. And we cannot heal that unless we confront those underlying factors that contribute to these social conflicts that we witness in this country. One element of transitional justice that's not provided for in the policy but is critical is the issue of institutional reform. Yes, we admit that there are processes that can be handled at the community level, at the local level, reconciliation at the local level, accountability at the local level, but there are national questions that must be addressed. There are state institutions that are characterized by acts of impunity, acts of violence against citizens. We have witnessed that during this pandemic. The enforcement of the COVID-19 regulations, particularly by the LGUs, have highlighted the need to entrench a culture of respecting human rights violations and ensuring that these institutions are held accountable to the highest standards as enshrined in our Constitution. So I believe those are key elements that the transitional justice process should consider.
She's the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. Let me also bring in Ms. Margaret Ajok. She's the National Advisor to the Justice, Law and Order Sector Secretariat of the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Ms. Margaret Ajok, how has COVID-19 affected the whole process of implementing the National Transitional Justice Policy?
Yeah, obviously, because we've been the normal traditional working processes in terms of physical visits and walks and meetings. Definitely there was a big throwback in terms of rolling out the policy, because that was one of our immediate reactions, that once the policy has been passed, let's roll it out to all the implementers. So there was that whole phase of blackout, and no one is reaching out to the other. So basically that was the biggest challenge in terms of the normal working conditions of a civil servant or any other Ugandan. However, now that things got lighter, and then we decided on what we have decided in terms of having virtual meetings and also having those media campaigns, and then all the plans that we've brought on board right now. However, the biggest challenge, of course, that the communities feel, and that when the policy was passed, this whole glimmer of hope that, you know, it has been passed and everything is going to be done immediately. But we know the way government processes work, and also the way any other process works. There must be a plan, there must be a budget, there must be all that. So there is a lot of expectation from the community that definitely government feels pressured about that. And not only being pressured, but also the victims are pressured, because there is the sentiment that they've waited for so long. Yes. But however, we would like to work, we'd like the citizens, the victims, to cooperate with us so that we have a process that will be credible, like Sarah has said, because if we do not have clear data on who the victims are or what harm they have suffered, how then do we roll out these processes? So that's why it's important that now and then we are able to collect as much information that we need in order to roll out these processes. There is already some information, and we already have also worked out how we will be able to get this information from the communities so that we can roll out the processes. However, there are some processes that do not need some of the prescriptions that we are having. One, for example, the traditional justice mechanisms, they have been working, they can still work, and this is a process, they have a structure that is already there that only needs to be boosted, and I think the policy gives them that boost. It gives them that legitimacy. So, and even the prosecutions, we haven't talked about it, but right now there are prosecutions that are ongoing for war crimes, crimes against humanity, that all are part of transitional justice. And I think this is also part of justice to the victim, or it's important that the citizen knows that there is already some action that is already taking place. The prosecutions are ongoing. The traditional processes work. We only need to support them. The amnesty process is ongoing. The reparations process is only one of those that is still the big elephant in the room, that we need a proper, and we need clear guidelines to move forward. So definitely, I think COVID has only affected our way of work, really, and of course increased the expectations of the victim, and also our own deliverables. So I think that's mainly it.
Ms. Margaret Ajok, she's the National Advisor on Transitional Justice at the Justice Law and Order Sector Secretariat of the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. So we would like to open the lines to our viewers who are watching the show right now. What do you make of all this? What is your perspective on transitional justice in Northern Uganda? We would like to know from you, so please get your phone and just call in right now. My panelists are itching to answer your questions. But as you do that, let me also engage Juliet Were. COVID-19, how has it affected development partners such as Women's International Peace Center, especially while you were gathering that data in Northern Uganda? What are some of the challenges you encountered along the way?
One key challenge is the fact that we are not able to meet, because the work that we do is about meeting people and interacting with people. So in the process, we were challenged on how we are going to do the community dialogues, on how our radio guests were going to move from their houses to go to the radio station. So in this process, we had to be innovative, because the campaign had to move on. With COVID, it had to move on. So we had to find ways of arranging for a border cyclist to go to the host's house, pick him, bring him to the radio station. We had to do a lot of negotiation and convincing, even counseling for our panelists to be able to move out to come to the talk shows. Because in the first place, everyone was scared of moving out of the house. For the community dialogues, later, when the lockdown system was eased a bit, we started organizing smaller meetings of 5 people with one of the community groups in the district to moderate the discussion. This meant that we had to organize many of small meetings over a period of time, something that would have done once, invite people, have a discussion, have it heated, analyze issues, and put them out. So it challenged us, and also called for our creativity to come up with innovative ways of responding and doing the work that we wanted to do. Of course, the issue of being able to access the people, to access the technical team was slowed. Everything was slowed, and we wouldn't move as fast as we anticipated. So
the number of respondents you managed to reach out to, what were some of the major recommendations they made?
One of the issues was access to justice. They called for free access to justice for survivors and victims. They called for organizing for awareness raising sessions to enable communities understand what their rights are, how they access justice. They called for having justice systems closer to their communities so that it's easy to access. They also called for capacity building for actors involved in delivering traditional justice systems. the religious leaders, the chiefs, the clan leaders, and others, so that they are able to handle issues to a conclusion and not cause harm to the other citizens in the process. They called for a massive trauma healing program that would be able to heal all members of the society, but a program that is continuous so that it can address the different challenges we've had in the societies. They called for future amnesty programs, not to be blanket programs, but to look at the specifics of the different categories of survivors, and also called for development programs to be long-term in nature so that they can help in rebuilding the livelihoods of communities and respecting those who are in place.
All right,
those
Juliet.
are some of the issues.
Let me also bring in Janet Arach. She's the co-founder and co-director of Wati Gen, a non-profit organization that works to support formerly abducted women and children born in captivity. Janet Arach, what are some of the practical steps that need to be undertaken to address the plight of women and children born in captivity?
What I see the need which is needed, counseling for the mothers, because during this the situation of COVID-19, many are also traumatized. They keep reflecting on their background and the situation they are in. So it needs counseling for them so that they know how to take their challenges. And secondly, as Ajok said, we need capacity building to the religious leaders, the clan leaders, even other people, so that they have the capacity to deal with such kind of people who are living in the community. And I also see that there is need of the government, if the government can embrace truth telling to the people, it would be good, because it also gives someone to have forgiveness to one another. And then I see also if these mothers, they can, storytelling also can make someone to really come up or forget of her background or the problems he or she has gone through. So when you tell it out, it will get away from you. So we need to encourage them to be telling their stories frequently so that they can get out of their situation. And then lastly, I see that the government should apologize to the victims, because if you see, many of the victims were abducted, and the government did not protect them. For example, I can give my example. I was a student when I was coming back from school. We entered an ambush, but the government soldiers were next to us where the ambush took place, and the rebels came and attacked the vehicle, and they shot the vehicle. Everybody died. I survived alone from that vehicle. Then I was taken. If the government was to rescue us immediately, we would have not been taken to the bush. So we need an apology from the government, because if you apologize for someone, it makes someone also to feel free and really feel that, okay, since somebody has apologized for you, you feel relief from the pain you have. So that is what I can say right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Janet Arach. Let me also bring in Honorable Leandro Komakech, the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. Mr. Komakech, help us address the issue of statelessness. But before you do that, I do have a phone call. Yes, Aloyo, now live on NTV Uganda. Good afternoon. We did lose that call, but please continue calling. The number is right there on your screens. I'd like to get to know the submission of the members of the public. What do you make of all this, the transitional justice in Northern Uganda? Well, Honorable Leandro Komakech, the issue of... We do have another call. Yes. Good afternoon, caller.
Hello?
Yes, how are you, sir?
I'm okay.
Your name and the issue?
My name is Patrick. I've been listening to
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was listening in, and I think that one key issue that has to be addressed is the issue of the national platform to bridge the North-South divide. That is one of the things that is probably not coming out very clear. The North-South divide has affected the generation, and the generation to come is going to have that issue. Quite frankly, healing does not come only with good, policies, but it has to have the component of healing. The healing should come from communities, but also having some kind of platform for people to have that kind of social healing, which doesn't seem to be coming out very clearly. So we cannot talk about healing in Northern Uganda, and we don't have a nationally, owned, community approach to healing or bridging the North-South divide in this context. That's my issue.
Thank you very much. Bridging the North and South divide, Honorable Leandro Komakech. What do you have to say about that? And number two, the issue of statelessness. Young people do not have documentation that you need to actually get involved in these government development programs for war survivors. And number three, widows are being chased off of their customary land that was given to them to earn a living. Is there something in terms of legislation that Parliament can do to help these people? But first, address the caller.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me start with the
North and South
divide.
The
North-South divide.
Yes.
This was, well, I could go back to challenges of state formation. In Uganda, the state called Uganda was not a product of any agreement signed by all. We are a product of historical accident. And for those who remember the history of this country, when the colonial administration came, they called us a protectorate. They even assigned to us a company to run this place called the IBEA, Imperial British East African Company, which was a chartered company in London. And later on, the people of Buganda signed a very interesting agreement called the Buganda Agreement, the 1900. If you did the history of right from primary to high school, and that is where we begin our challenge of the North-South divide. The Buganda Agreement was written in Kiswahili and English, not in Luganda. So the version that was taken to England was Kiswahili and English version. The Luganda version came later, which was a very adulterated version that actually spoke different from the original text of what was submitted in the House of Commons. Now, it was so strange that as they submitted, the gentleman called Sir Harry Johnston, that we studied in history, when he submitted that report, he removed the letter B and submitted it as Uganda Agreement, which was very fictitious. So at the end, the House of Commons debated and just adopted that agreement, and therefore also accepted that this part of the country we call Uganda. So if you ask anybody in this country the meaning of Uganda, it has no meaning to our legacies. It has no meaning, not even in Buganda.
Just a bit that was subtracted.
So it is just a very dry word, but it is the name of a country now. Just like Kenya is a mountain.
So how do we harmonize the North and South?
So that is why I'm coming to the issue of when the administrations created running this country, all these nations called tribes were brought on board through simple agreements. Ankole, 1901, and then the rest. In summary, those in the north were taken to be giants and tall and all this hard-working. So that was the labor force. In the south, they said, okay, I think this can be very good clerical officers and they should be in offices and, So that created a very big structural imbalance in this country, where the southerners thought they were sitting nearer with the colonial administration. The northerners were taken to build Owen Falls dams, all this hard stuff.
I'm afraid, Mr. Leandro, you
so
might
at
not
the
have
end of the
time
day,
for a history lesson.
No,
Yes.
at the end of the day, I'm giving you this background
Yes.
because many Ugandans may not understand the origin of North-South divide.
So
I think what we now need is national healing.
National healing.
How do we have sustainable peace in this country if we have not gone through a national reconciliation?
Indeed.
So that is the step. National reconciliation and sustainable peace. But it begins with the community healing.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leandro Komakech is a Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. I couldn't agree more. Let's go back to Sarah Kihika Kasande, the Head of Office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. Yes, Sarah, we are talking about recommendations. What are some of those recommendations that you have to alleviate the suffering of women and children born in captivity?
Okay. Thank you. But if you just allow me 1 minute to piggyback on what Leandro just mentioned and what the caller asked about social healing. I think it's still critical that reconciliation is part and parcel of our TJ process. And I'm glad that one of the key outcomes that it looks at is nation building and reconciliation. As I mentioned in my earlier submission, that one of the challenges we face in this country are the structural imbalances that exist. The North-South divide, really, as Leandro has highlighted, has its roots in the colonial legacy, but it's now been instrumentalized where access to resources, access to opportunity is based on identity, where you're from, where you belong. So the transitional justice process has a critical role to address this, and as I highlighted, through a credible process, through a credible truth-seeking process, that investigates and seeks to address those structural imbalances, those divisions that are drawn based on ethnicity, based on religion, and based on various forms of identity. Now, back to the question on what must be done to address the challenges that women and children face.
Indeed.
First, within the transitional justice process, we're looking at elements of reparations. Reparations to assist survivors recover from the harms that they endured, reparations to enable them live a dignified life, and importantly, to provide them with justice, whereby it's an affirmation of their rights as citizens. The other aspect is to see that in the long term, the state and citizens reflect on changing a culture that enables, that tolerates violence against women and girls. Because as we know that sexual violence in conflict does not happen as an isolated issue. It is a reflection of what our society tolerates. It simply amplifies it. So for us to prevent this from happening, we must see that we change our cultural norms, we change our patriarchal attitudes that normalize violence, and create a culture where women's rights as entrenched in the Constitution are respected. You asked a question about denying widows land, whether we need legislative reform. We actually don't need legislative reform. We need the existing laws to be enforced. We need those that citizens have entrusted with the mandate to deliver justice, to investigate injustices, to do their job, to see that when a widow reports a case that she's been deprived of her land, her rights are adequately protected. And that's how we move forward as a society that respects the rights of women, girls, and all persons in our society. Thank you
very much for that wonderful submission. And also, Juliet Were, what are your final submissions, your recommendations from Track FM, recommendations from Women's International Peace Center especially?
The key issue is that we should emphasize the issue of nation building and reconciliation if we are to heal as a country, but also to give communities that experience conflict an opportunity, a chance. So we need to see affirmative programs that are going to support the recovery and healing of these communities.
And Ms. Margaret Ajok, recommendations from the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Justice, Law and Order sector.
Well, for me, I think I would like to reiterate government's commitment to addressing the effects of conflict, and like we have enumerated in the policy, it's through a holistic process, and we believe that things like healing and reconciliation are both individual, they are personal, and all that stuff. So by the time we arrive at a national platform, we must have had individual healing, we must have had communal healing, and we must have we have to have an agreed agenda, really, that we as a country have that agenda for healing and reconciliation. But I believe with the tenets of the policy, we are already promoting that. We have reiterated in the policy, for example, that traditional justice is hinged on truth-seeking. Even when you go to the courts, you swear in the witness box to say the truth and nothing but the truth. When we go for reparations processes, we verify legitimate claimants. I think the processes that we are proposing in the policy are embedded in truth-seeking, and I think rightly so. I think we can only achieve that through the varied mechanisms that we propose in the policy, and I wouldn't want to subtract much, but say really that we are committed to realizing the proposals in the policy.
And please give the people of Northern Uganda and this country some assurance that in this policy there will be a truth-seeking body.
We will have a body that is going to implement the National Transitional Justice Policy. It will be well structured. I think Leandro tried to hint to it that just like any other body or authority that is created, it has a structure. And therefore, this body that is going to implement the policy, which is the now Amnesty Commission, that is going to be restructured to a transitional justice body, will definitely address the issues of the policy, including nation building and reconciliation.
Ms. Margaret Ajok is the National Advisor on Transitional Justice at the Justice, Law and Order Sector Secretariat of the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. She was not alone. I also did have Honorable Leandro Komake. She's the Member of Parliament for Gulu Municipality. And I also did have Juliet Were. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Our online evangelists, I would like to thank you to Janet Arach, the co-director and co-founder of Watiekchi Jan. It's an NGO that works to support formerly abducted women and children born in captivity. And lastly, Sarah Kihika Kasande is the head of office at the International Center for Transitional Justice. I would like to let you know that there is a policy that was passed and it's there to help you. So being in the know is the #1 weapon that you need right there. Information is power. My name is Romeo Busiku, and please do have yourselves a blessed day.